Welcome to the CEO of Destiny podcast, where you will find the tools to fulfill the purpose of your generation and wildly succeed in the marketplace. And now your host, Andre J. Benjamin.
It kind of growing up, all those things and all those experiences shaped who I am today. What I mean by that is like, I am aware that these are things that happen in the rest of the world. If everything was sunshine and rainbows all growing up, I would be so disconnected from reality. I'd be so disconnected from what's actually happening in the real world. And to be real, like I've been playing basketball on the weekends with some of these billionaires. It's pretty crazy. Some of the founders of some of the companies that you've heard of. And it's funny because a lot of them actually did grow up in a very coddled bubble growing up. And they're so disconnected, and it sucks because they have resources. Like legit, one of them is worth $11 billion. If he just even gives 1/10 of that away towards mission-driven things, that has insane impact. But because their upbringing was just kind of, very, they went to private school growing up and all that type of stuff, it's like they're very disconnected from reality. And my hope is in those relationships, we play basketball and hang out and whatever, I would essentially be able to help kind of bring an eye-opening kind of context or part to the conversation that will be helpful for them to grow too. But anyways, going back to the origin story, all throughout Georgia, or I guess the rest of my grade school, I then ended up moving into the city for college just because I wanted to get out of the suburban context. It was just kind of boring, kind of slow. I wanted to ultimately do something impactful for our world, but I didn't really know what to do or how to do it because my parents were, to be real, immigrants. They didn't really know what could you even do in the U.S.
They're trying to navigate. They're trying to learn to navigate.
Exactly. And they didn't really know how to direct me. All they knew was, if you become a doctor or a lawyer, you'll be successful. So they kept trying to push me towards that. And clearly I didn't do that. And so they eventually became proud of me. But anyways, I went to the city because I was like, I got to learn something somehow from somewhere. And so went into the city, like downtown Atlanta. That's where I really appreciated it because I was back in a multicultural type context. I was able to connect with brilliant people. I went to Emory for undergrad and then Georgia Tech for grad school. I was at Emory for pre-med just because, again, my parents thought I should be a doctor and I didn't really know any better anyway. So I did pre-med, but I also did math and computer science just so that because I loved gaming growing up. I loved tech. I remember when I was I think I was 4 years old. My dad got a Windows 95. And yeah, I was 4 years old. I was born 91. So my dad got a Windows 95 and I loved it. I was on that thing all day. I remember I was learning from like Britannica or something, some like encyclopedia. I was a little kid, like learning about cheetahs and elephants. And like, I was just like, it's funny because, and I was like learning how to read using Britannica. Like I didn't learn it in school. I learned it just because of the computer, because the computer itself was so fascinating. So I knew that I loved technology. So going to school at Emory was helpful for not only being able to discover that I liked technology, but also because it helped me better understand humans, relationships, really on the pre-med side, right? Because, wanting to become a doctor, you have to learn about human anatomy, how humans are wired, how they work, but also you have to build relationships in that world. It's very highly relational. Whereas the tech side, you could just be a little coder in front of your computer and never have to talk to a human being ever again. So very, very different. But if you're able to bring those two worlds together, technological innovation with human capital, human relevance, human whatever, you bring those two things together, can be extremely impactful, right? So I thought I wanted to work on like robotic arms and things like that, but little did I know, it was just hard to break into that world. Not just hard to break into, that world is very niche. There wasn't very many. Now there's way more companies trying to work on those types of problems, but back then there was like one. And that one also barely had funding. And so it was just like, all right, even if I wanted to work in that space, I'd probably have to work for free. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not working on that yet because I don't have a nest egg to live off of yet. And so I then decided to just work in the web world. I was 21 when I got my first job as a coder. Within about 2 years, I went from job to job to job, kind of growing up or getting promoted into higher positions. And my last job when I was 23, I was the lead software architect for CNN, the news network, and they had me on a project called greatbigstory.com. And that's where it was essentially the TikTok of CNN. It's crazy because it was TikTok before we knew TikTok would be viral.
Crazy.
And that's why I was able to have 3 million daily active users within 2 months, is because it was that sort of microwave, instant gratification type world.
Absolutely.
And we learned a ton through the project. It was really cool, but I ended up transitioning out, and I found out that GreatBigStory.com actually shut down a couple of years ago. I ended up leaving. So they had to find someone else because I was the lead on that. So they had to find someone else to end up leading that. But I ended up focusing on a PhD in computer vision and machine learning at Georgia Tech. But I found out that was going to be like 8 years. So about 2.5 years in, I was like, all right, forget this. I'm settling for the master's degree. I'm going to just try to build something on my own, because every context I was in, whether it be the web development world, building products for other companies, like me building GreatBigStory.com for CNN, or me going to the research lab where everyone there just wants to tinker with drones and self-driving cars and it's cool stuff, but there was never any direct path towards productization or getting it out to the world and having people use it. They essentially would just work on cool tech, talk to the Department of Defense, hey, do you want this? And 90%, 95% of the time, the Department of Defense say, no, we have another version of it. And they're like, all right, we'll go back to the drawing board and work on something else. Just like literally just like wasting our time almost, right? Where instead of going to the Department of, like in hindsight, I was like, we could literally just like ask that person who we just said, hey, do you want this thing? And ask them, hey, what do you need? Exactly. We didn't even know to do that. So we were just like, oh, well, I guess we'll just try to come up with something, and we'll be Steve Jobs, and we know what you want us to build. And which is not how Steve Jobs operated, even though people say that all the time. And so we would just work on random junk, show it to them. They would say 95% of the time, no, we already have something. It's just like very inefficient, kind of just a waste of time. It was very clear to me that the people who were there, and even the research professors who were there, were just there because it was a system that existed and they could really live their actual lives that they're passionate about outside of that time. Yep. So they could tinker with stuff and it's like a fun little hobby, but then they go home with their family and friends, which is fine, which is good. It's just most of their waking hours that they're spending at their day job, they're just killing their time. So all I have to say, I was like, man, there's got to be a more effective way to live life. And so that's why I decided to start Immersed.
So let's go back. I want to ask you a couple probing questions about in your origin story. So did you know, when was the point that you discovered basically your superpower or your distinct ability? Like when was that point when you were like, no, yes, parents said pre-med or, doctor or whatever the lucrative careers, which is smart, because that's the thing I actually love about immigrants is they have a mindset of, we want the economic value degrees. We don't want,
makes sense.
We don't want the study of something random. We want something that translates into dollars. So when was that moment where you discovered that?
Yeah. So I started learning how to code when I was 20. So I was really late. Because the first 2 or 3 years of undergrad, I was very focused on the pre-med side. But when I started thinking, man, I started shadowing orthopedic surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, and neurosurgery. And it was cool because I got to live the lifestyle of it. I would just follow them, and I would sleep the same time they slept, and I would wake up the same time they would wake up. And we're in the hospital all day. And it was cool because I was able to get into the surgeries, while he was doing a craniotomy and taking someone's skull off and kind of poking the sac that was high pressure or whatever. And then legit got brain juice squirted on me. It was disgusting, but it was good exposure. I think for me though, as I started seeing how the type of dark humor neurosurgeons had to have, because their hit rate was super low, the recovery rate of their patients was just really bad. And so they just had to have almost a dark humor in order to cope. Saying, oh, this guy's probably going to die. It's you say that so lightly. And it was just very clear that they didn't know how to deal with it either. And for me, I was like, well, if y'all don't know how to cope with this, I don't know how to cope with this type of stuff. And I don't know that I want to live this type of lifestyle. And so I ended up deciding to not go the pre-med route, because I wasn't the person that was super interested in things like pediatrics or I don't know, whatever different types of doctors there are, dermatology, I don't know, whatever. I wanted to do, because I'm a very surgical minded person, meaning when I see the way I operate in the tech world, I'm highly meticulous. I make sure that every detail is taken care of. That's what surgeons do on the med side, on the medical side. But on the tech side, I realized that same gifting applies there. It's just, the output is different. I started coding when I was 20 because I knew I was good at math, and I told you I had a perfect score on the math SATs. I just started taking math classes at Emory, and if you wanted to have a math major, you have to take one coding class. So I took one coding class, I haven't told the story in a long time, so I forgot about this story. I took one coding class, and actually I got a C- in it in Java. And it's part of it was I was just so busy with everything else I didn't really pay attention, and so I was just like coding random crap, and it just wasn't even working. And so it made sense. Like, you have to apply yourself, you have to really try. But that was like the last thing in my mind. I was like, I don't want to take this coding class. Like, I want to be a math major. But then after I got that C-, later that summer, another student told me, "Oh, hey, I'm taking that same class you took last year. Can you tutor me in it?" I was like, "I got a C-, so you don't want me to tutor you." He's like, "Dude, I don't know anyone else who took any of those classes. So can you just please like show me at least some of this stuff?" I'm like, "All right, I'll try." And so when I started showing him some of the stuff I was working on, it started clicking, right? You've probably heard this phrase before. When you start teaching something, things start making way more sense.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I was like, wait, this makes so much sense. Why did I do it that way? This is so much better. And like, I started really getting good at it just accidentally. And obviously I realized like that was God being sovereign in the process of like humbling me, giving me that first C-, and then also showing me, actually, you're good at this thing. You just gotta be humble about it. And so I started taking more coding classes, and it turns out I was actually very, very good at it, and it actually became fun. Anyways, I'm just like reminiscing on some of the really cool projects I used to work on back during kind of my small undergrad bubble homework Java project days, where there were no consequences to what you build. Back then,
I love it, because this helps. The reason why I ask these questions that are probing around the foundation is because I don't want people to ever have the misconception that you were like dreaming in code when you were 7 and 5, and you were doing coding competitions at age 3. Like, that's sometimes the misconception is people have, is that they came out the womb as a so-called whiz kid, but there was a process.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. Because what I will say is the DNA of what ended up being what I'm working on now, in hindsight, I could see signs of it here and there, like the Halo Pro stuff, or even beating up kids and winning fights. I think it's so bad. But the desire for victory, or the desire for accomplishing something, being successful, that was there all along the way. And now it's just expressed differently. I'm not fighting with kids anymore. Like,
a little more constructive.
Yeah, I'm not fighting with kids anymore. Now I'm fighting with Zuck in a different way. I'm just kidding. It's just a very different type of context. But jokes aside, it's just like I realized that all along the way, though I desired what I desired, God had still orchestrated a story or a path that I would follow. And all along, he knew what he was doing. Like, he knew where he needed me to be. And even though I didn't know what the crap was going on, I could see God's love in that by him just like kind of watching over all of this and making sure it needed to go where it ended up going, while Renju was making the dumb little decisions that he made along the way.
Can you think back on any couple things, and then of course we're going to get into the world of tech, but can you think of any either teachers, instructors, or role models that saw basically this dormant gold that was in you in some form and was able to call it out in your formative years?
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do us a favor. If this was useful in any way for you, please go to iTunes and leave us a review. Reviews will allow others to easily discover the podcast. If you'd like more information and to receive a free download, rediscover your destiny, go to ceoofdestiny.com. Thanks again, and tune in next time.